plan, Colleen.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for being here. We are so excited today to be presenting to you our draft Regional Safety Action Plan. So Jared Draper from Twin Design is going to be walking us through what's in the draft plan. But I just also want to thank all of you, because I know most of you have dedicated a lot of time to this over the course of the last year, and we're at the kind of final stage of this process. So thank you, and we're excited to present the plan to you. Take it away, Jared.
All
right. Good afternoon. Nice to see everyone. Colleen said I've got 10 minutes. I've got 46 slides, so we'll move rather quickly. Many of you that have been part of this process, you've seen many of these things before, but I think it's important to start with this plan at the regional level is to develop resources, that is identify things that the TPO can champion, as well as think through the data and kind of the next steps for each of the member agencies. And so this is really a walk through that document. This is kind of the body of the plan, as well as some of the appendices. I will not go through everything that is on these slides, but I'm going to try to reserve some time for questions toward the end. So it starts with this idea of a roadway safety vision. This is a shift from a lot of the ways that we have historically done safety planning for transportation across our nation. And so leaning into the safe system approach that really does emphasize not necessarily eliminating every crash on our roadway, but focusing on the fatal and serious injury crashes. This is made up, the safe system approach is made up of 6 principles. You can see here the idea that we can do something about death and serious injury crashes, that because we are vulnerable, that we need to take the appropriate steps, that we need to share responsibility, and that this is not just a reactive approach, that we need to be more proactive when it comes to roadway safety. Along with 5 elements, I won't walk through each one of these, but this is every action that is in this plan is not intended to be about one of these elements. It's intended to be about many of these elements, so that we really do take a system approach. This plan aligns with the target year when it looks at NCDOT for 2050 of eliminating fatal and serious injury crashes, but cutting that number in half by 2035. So if we just take, for instance, 2023, where we had almost 300 fatal and serious injury crashes, really we're looking at cutting that in half by 2035 to 150, and then to 0 by 2050. So what do we do to get there? We need to not only understand where we've been and some of the reactive and the kind of the characteristics of our roadways that are causing these types of crashes, but then to start to learn from those characteristics and set forth kind of the appropriate actions. So this plan looks at the data across the region. We really did take a data-driven approach, not only with crash data, but also starting to identify high injury networks and high injury intersections across the region. You can see here, because this is a resource, we have the regional high injury network and intersections, but we also did context specific or kind of local high injury network and high injury intersection analysis as well. So for the high injury network, you can see some of the coverage. That first percentage is the percentage of roadways, and then it covers, based upon our the period that we looked at, that percentage of the killed and serious injury crashes, KSI. So you can see how it's different each one of those locations. This plan also took a deep dive into equity and the kind of indicators of potential disadvantage across the region. This is just kind of a snapshot of those things. And again, it's similar to the high injury network. It was done at a regional scale, but it was also done for each one of the agencies that we identified. Vulnerable roadway users is another kind of key component of this, looking at people that walk and bike, understanding that because they are not inside of a vehicle, they oftentimes when there is a crash that involves higher speeds, they can lead to those fatal and serious injury crashes due to the speed or the context of the roadway. Engagement and input. This plan is the start of a conversation across the region, and one that we believe not only the TPO, but each one of the local agencies needs to continue. And luckily, there are a lot of agencies that are already moving this forward. We started with the Safety Summit. We did project advisory meetings and really heard from people across the region. We held an open house in Chapel Hill. There's another one in Carborough this week on Thursday evening. And then really starting to lean into some of the engagement that people had done across the region with other planning events and engagement activities that are already going on. And so we have a survey that's going to be live this week where we're collecting input on actions, priorities, as well as investment in roadway safety. Focus areas and priority projects. Because of the safe system approach, this is not just about addressing places that crashes have happened, but also looking to the places that they could happen in the future based upon a variety of things. Leans into proven safety countermeasures as well as other systemic opportunities that are across the region. Our criteria for prioritization focus in on severity, exposure, and like risk or likelihood of crashes. And so what this does, it not only captures some of those kind of key areas along the high injury networks, but also places where those characteristics exist in other places. So how we can really prioritize those at the regional level as well as at the local level. Just really quickly, I won't go into all of this. One of the things that we talked about in our last technical project meeting was that these maps, they are very static. They are kind of showing you generally the opportunities that exist. The data behind these maps that the TPO is going to have and be available for member agencies across the region is really where the power of making decisions come, because it identifies the things related to how did it get on the high injury network in the first place? What are the characteristics of risk or severity that is behind each one of these lines and each one of these? And so even though we have those looking at regional corridors and regional intersections, as well as each individual community that we kind of like dove into their priority corridors and intersections. Really, it is the data that's behind these that we're going to support some of the decision-making and project development across the region. The strategies and actions, this is the bulk of what this document is all about. There are projects related to prioritize corridors and intersections, but these actions change the way that organizations do business. The programs, the policies, how do you make long-lasting change? And so to simplify a list of actions, we've created 11 different categories. I won't go through every single table, but you could see this is where kind of they fell into these categories based upon the data analysis results, as well as engagement across the region. So this is just a look at what those tables are in the plan. They have the action, they have a time frame, a generalized cost, and something that would be part of that action. In the appendix, which I'll get to in a moment, some of these things for individual communities will shift a little bit. Maybe it's the time frame is a little bit different. Maybe there's additional partners that we can identify. And so just like walking through those quickly, you'll see, I believe we have around 85 different actions across all 11 categories. Again, I won't read all of them. I would love for feedback on these as you review kind of the bigger plan. But what you can see is that in this first one, we're really about the TPO taking a leadership role in developing resources. And then as we move through these kind of more specific or contextual action categories, the leading partners are usually either NCDOT or municipalities. With change in multimodal safety along multi-lane arterials, we know that that was a huge issue and lit up along a lot of the high injury network, as well as some of the risk corridors, high-speed rural corridors, acknowledging that this is a very large region and not everything is urban, so we need to understand the suburban and rural context. Safer routes to school, traffic calming on local streets, trail and railroad crossings, unsafe intersections. Similar to the multi-lane arterial, we really broke these out to understand that there are actions that can be taken around intersections related and also along the corridor of the segment. And then behavior and distraction, recognizing that we believe that change or culture related to traffic safety needs to be happening at every level. It's every individual's responsibility to think about how what actions they take on the roadway. But there are opportunities to make those changes at an organizational level as well. And then land development practices and procedures, because land use and transportation are inherently tied together. And so what are we doing to increase safety there as well? And then you saw we had a vulnerable roadway user high injury network. We also acknowledged that this was a key concern, not only from our technical project team, but also in public engagement and what we're seeing not only here, but across the nation about vulnerable roadway users at night. Lastly, the main part of the body is metrics and accountability. We identified that there are a number of performance metrics that could be tracked moving forward. And so these are some of those examples to really say, how are we doing making a difference if we're going to not only look at our numbers as we move toward a milestone of 2035, but ultimately at 2050. What are the things that some of our data is telling us? What does that mean that we need to shift or do differently if the numbers are not going the way that we would expect? Additionally, this plan identifies a target setting framework for the TPO to think through in future years. This year, looking at kind of adopting what the targets from NCDOT, kind of on the rate and the number reduction. What this points to is an opportunity to take a deeper dive into some of those numbers and identify what is happening on different roadway ownerships. So when it comes to NCDOT or local non-system ownership, as well as looking at it by mode. What this really does is open up kind of some of those actions and potential projects to be more pointed. If we're seeing a high number of pedestrian fatalities and serious injuries, and they're on local roads, what are we doing about that? How do we prioritize those things? And so year over year, we'd be able to see not only what's happening and the change that's happened from the year before, but also what are we going to do in the future if this is going to be our target to make change. Lastly, and I'll open up for questions, looking at the appendices. So we kind of gave a summary of all of the methodologies when it came to high injury network, high risk, as well as prioritization, our equity mapping, as well as analysis, which leans into a methodology called the indicators of potential disadvantage. Engagement summary is the work in progress. We have more engagement going on this week as well as in the coming weeks. And then lastly, we have a whole appendix that is dedicated to the member agency maps and actions. And so just wanted to give an example that every single one of the agencies includes kind of a package of maps as well as actions related to their crashes, high injury networks, high injury intersections, high risk corridors and intersections, equity, as well as vulnerable roadway users, and then prioritization of segments and intersections. So the goal is that every single one of those agencies has access not only to their maps and tables, but also will have the data that corresponds with those as the plan is completed. I think I went over 10, but
I think 10 to 15. Okay. You're the only thing on that agenda, really. So
happy to answer some questions. Yes.
Orange County, from what it looks like in this map, and the Burlington side MPO has an action plan like this too. So now Orange County has two safety action plans, Vision Zero plans, BGMPO side, DCSMPO side. That creates a void within the RPO. Can this data and the analysis be expanded to include all of Orange County, or is this something we would need to create ourselves?
So I know Carol from the RPO, we've been coordinating pretty closely with her. She's in our office. So
yeah, but that's only the data for the RPO area, the Orange County. Like
they're in the process of doing their own safety action plan. Well, it's stalled at the moment because of some funding issues.
So then we have 3 action plans, so BGMPO, TPRPO, and the CRPO. So I had to put them all together into one.
We can maybe work out some ways to help you weave those together so it's effective and it's not, make sure there's some consistencies across them.
Awesome. Thank you.
Definitely. I mean, Carol's been part of the technical committee, so she's really been in the loop the whole time. I expect that there will be plenty of overlap between
Awesome.
what
Thank
we're
you.
doing and what will happen in the RPO side. Thanks for bringing that up.
Question, and this probably relates more to what I imagine will be future versions of this plan, perhaps enabled as methodology to do it might evolve. But I wonder if it's possible to work toward in the future getting even more specific on the goals and objectives to where we say, okay, to achieve this % reduction in fatal and injury crashes by this year, we think we need to see this much change in this and that driver behavior, build this many projects on a high injury network. So forth.
Yeah, it's a great point. So there's like a variety of ways to think through the specificity there. You could do a straight line of like what that decrease would need to be. How to achieve that needs to be a both addressing projects on the high injury network as well as addressing risk. We've done some of our risk analysis actually captures, if you were to like look historically, some of like the future. So we did the analysis early, and then we got new crash data, and our risk analysis identified, I think it was like 40% of the new crash data was on the risk network. And so you can't just address the high injury network, you have to also be addressing that risk. And so the numbers that you're asking could absolutely be included in this document of kind of what we need to see year over year to see those drops. The hope is that the framework then starts to pinpoint, are there additional opportunities of where to do that? So if it is, again, my example was, if you see a high number of fatalities on local roadways for pedestrians, what in the coming years can you do for pedestrians to get that increment down?
Any other questions?
I'll just add, essentially our public comment period on the draft plan is unofficially open now because the draft plan is, available. It's up and available on our website, and we'll be doing community outreach events starting this week, probably through the rest of the month. The action we're requesting at this time is for the TC to recommend the board officially release the plan, the draft plan for public comment. And then we'll be bringing this back in April for final adoption on the MPO side.
So let us know when your events are going to be, if there's going to be any events that we can engage in, and we have facilities here engaging for Orange County as well.
Yes. Yeah. At our event in Carborough on Thursday, Orange County Bike Ped Plan's also a part of that. So yeah, your team from Stantec should be at that event too. And I believe there's one in Chapel Hill on the 25th at the library.
And tell us where we can.
We'd like to get a pop-up event scheduled in Hillsborough. We've got one in Durham this weekend, and we're hoping to schedule some more. I know Durham is also bringing their own Vision Zero plan to council this month. So we didn't want to confuse people between the regional and the local safety action plans, although they definitely overlap, and there's a lot of crossover.
Deal with that. We're looking for a motion and board release for public comment. So move. Anish. Looking for a second.
Second.
Second by Becca. All in favor? Any opposed? Passes unanimously.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jared.
Thanks, Jared.
That concludes our action items, and we're on to informational items. We just have two today, draft 2026 to 2035, state transportation improvement. Update, go on.
Yeah, said this is just an update. No action being requested. This is being transmitted for information purposes. So this, yeah, just an update on our draft step. So to get started, what's the steps? It's going to go into kind of intro on that. It's a 10-year document. It's fiscally restrained and it covers all modes of transportation and also covers all POs and RPOs within the state. Just some background knowledge. The first